Can't be sure it's my son's. My mother-in-law shouted at my baby shower, handing me a DNA kit. I was humiliated. Weeks later, her business was ruined. The sun's rays were gently lighting up the room in our apartment, high above the streets of Manhattan, as I woke up. I put my hand on my growing stomach and smiled, feeling the baby kick. I'd built a solid reputation for myself in the city as one of the best event planners around. My specialty was managing significant corporate events and weddings for rich clients, and my eye for detail and ability to pull off the perfect event were praised throughout the city. "Hey there," Stephen said, his voice sounding cheerful as he came out of the bathroom, finishing drying his hair. Stephen was a smart guy. He was an executive at a big investment firm on Wall Street. He was a handsome man, over 6 feet tall and in great shape, with a look that showed he was smart, and he'd pursued me relentlessly after we met at a charity event I had planned. We'd been married for 3 years now. The baby is really moving around a lot this morning. "I have a feeling it's a girl," I said, smiling. I was now in my 7th month, and my bump was pretty big now. Our connection had grown so strong since we found out we were going to be parents. "You think it's a girl? Have we talked about names?" Stephen wondered. "Not yet," I responded, "but we'll find out at our next checkup." While he was fixing his tie, Stephen suddenly remembered something. "Oh, how's the baby shower coming along for this weekend? Did my mother say she's going to make it?" At those words, my face became a little less happy. My connection with Stephen's mom, Barbara Johnson, was really complicated. Barbara was 62 years old, and she had very traditional beliefs, hailing from South Carolina. After her husband died a decade ago, she'd relocated to Long Island and owned a small, fancy interior design business. Barbara always dreamed Stephen would marry a girl from a good background. She didn't think Melissa, with her self-made success, fit that ideal. Though she acted polite on the surface, her comments frequently held sharp edges, never missing a chance to wound me. "Everything will be okay," I told myself. "Jenny is assisting me," Melissa said. My sister, Jennifer Carter, was a brilliant lawyer employed by a significant New York law firm. Those two sisters, they were quite different. Jennifer was a long-legged, thin lady, while Melissa, was small and fuller-figured. We had opposite personalities as well. Jennifer would do whatever it took to defend her sister and firmly stood up to Barbara's critical remarks. "If Jenny is coming, that's a comfort," Stephen said with a sigh of relief. He also worried about the dynamic between his mom and me. Sometimes he felt torn between feeling thankful to his parent and being devoted to his dear wife. I was gazing out the window, observing the landscape outside, and thinking about my folks. Robert and Carol Green lived in a calm, residential neighborhood. Robert was a retired high school instructor, and Carol volunteered her time at the local library. They were kind, accepting people who had completely embraced Stephen as part of their family. "Your parents are coming too, correct?" Stephen posed the question. "Absolutely," I responded. "Mom is already thrilled, it's true. She's in the process of creating a hand-knitted blanket for the upcoming arrival." Stephen gave a little smile and put his hand on Melissa's shoulder. "Do you honestly think you'll be able to get along with my mother?" I took a long, deep breath before responding. "It'll be okay," I reassured myself. "Barbara must be eager to have a grandchild. Perhaps this will actually make things better between us." Truthfully, Barbara was continuously exhibiting little acts of spitefulness towards me. She'd send cards on their wedding anniversary with messages such as, "I hope you're making my son happy," or give me clothes that were the wrong size for Christmas, remarking, "You'll want to make sure you don't put on any pounds." Despite pretending to be friendly, the relationship was still icy. "Is there anything I can assist with before you leave for work?" Stephen inquired, already taking a quick look at his watch. He'd recently been given a big project at work, and he was swamped with both the pressure and the duties. But his hard work was starting to bear fruit. Specifically, his success in fostering a connection with Alexander Ross, a significant real estate development tycoon, was proving to be a significant shift in his career. "No, there's no need for you to worry about it. Just concentrate on what you need to do at work," I told him, giving him a peck on the cheek as I saw him out the door. Alexander Ross was a businessperson in his mid-60s, and he was one of the most important clients for Stephen's company. Their current business discussions had been positive, and as a result, Stephen received a lot of good recognition from his company. As I sat by myself in the room, I started talking to my unborn child once more. "I just know that once you arrive, everyone will be more gentle. Even Grandma will soften when she finally sees you." However, even as I tried to convince myself of this, I still felt uneasy somewhere inside. I kept wondering how to actually talk to Barbara at the baby shower that was coming up. I was worried that my mother-in-law's judging attitude would wound me this time. I inhaled slowly to relax myself a little, then I walked over to my desk. The function room, located in a fancy hotel close to Central Park in New York City, had been decorated with soft-colored balloons and beautiful flowers. The walls were hung with pink and blue ribbons in alternating sections, and there was a big banner that said, "Welcome, Baby Johnson." There were some really pretty tables set up in the center of the room, which were overflowing with adorable little cakes and other yummy treats. Even though I had organized everything myself, I was the guest of honor for the day. I had on a light purple maternity dress that loosely fit around my growing tummy. "Mel, this place is fantastic. You really know what you're doing," my sister Jennifer said as she walked up to me, carrying a pair of champagne glasses. She gave me a glass of sparkling cider and whispered, "She's here." I turned, and I saw Barbara Johnson standing just inside the entrance. Barbara, wearing an eye-catching bright green dress with a perfectly coiffed, short white hairdo, definitely stood out. Next to her was one of the women from her store, and she was holding a large package. Barbara came over to me, a smile on her face that struck me as superficial, and gave me a kiss on the cheek. She said, "Melissa, what a wonderful party." I wasn't fooled by the insincerity hidden behind it. I replied, "Thanks, Barbara, I'm happy you made it," while searching for Stephen with my eyes. He was across the room, totally engrossed in a discussion with Alexander Ross and his wife, Sandra. Alexander, in his late 60s, cut a formidable figure, possessing piercing eyes and hair that was a mix of gray and dark. In the New York real estate market, he was a huge name and one of the most significant clients for Stephen's firm. Having him attend as a guest of honor was Stephen's idea. It turned out that, just like Stephen had predicted, the mixing of business and personal connections really can strengthen relationships, and Alexander was thrilled to come. As the evening moved forward, the atmosphere in the room slowly started to become more animated. My friends, people from my workplace, and my parents, Robert and Carol, all got there. They walked right up to Stephen and hugged him. Jennifer, my sister, gently tapped my shoulder and asked, "It's time for me to host. Are you prepared?" She had offered to be the master of ceremonies for this get-together. After I nodded, Jennifer walked to the middle of the room and lightly tapped her glass to get the attention of everyone. She announced, "We're all here today to celebrate Melissa and Stephen's first child." She added, "This is a very special time for both of them and for our entire family." Her words were greeted by enthusiastic clapping from everyone there. Okay, so now that the party games were over, it was time to get to the main event, the gifts. Everyone had had a good time guessing the baby's gender and due date, and we'd all chatted about the names Melissa and Stephen were considering. Barbara was there, pretending to enjoy herself, but I kept noticing that her gaze was constantly fixed on Melissa. The moment arrived to begin opening all the presents. Melissa settled into a chair that had been placed in the middle of the room, with Stephen right by her side. Presents were given to her one at a time, and each time adorable baby outfits, fun toys, or helpful baby supplies were uncovered, people cheered. Next up was a gift from Stephen's mom, Jennifer declared, and Barbara walked up with a huge smile. Her helper put a big box in front of Melissa. "This is a special gift, Melissa." Barbara said this, and her voice didn't have its usual sharp edge, which caused Melissa to smile back with a bit of optimism. "This is the perfect gift for my grandchild," Barbara continued, and everybody in the room looked over at Melissa. She loosened the ribbon and carefully opened the lid. For a moment, she was completely stunned by what was inside. Inside the box was a second box, which had the logo of a big DNA testing company. The words, "Verify your family ties," were written on it in bold colors. "This is," Melissa stammered, and Barbara spoke up loudly, "a DNA test kit. Because we can't be sure if this is really my son's baby, can we?" Barbara let out a loud laugh, but it was the only sound that filled the room. Room felt incredibly cold. Melissa's complexion turned ghostly, and her hands began to shake. Her mother and father stared at Barbara, looking stunned. "Mom, what exactly are you suggesting?" I heard Stephen ask in a hushed tone, attempting to keep his temper under control. His face was flushed with fury, and he was squeezing his hands into fists. "It was just a jest, Stephen. Everyone's overreacting," Barbara replied, chuckling a bit, yet the room's overall mood had noticeably shifted. People glanced at one another, unable to conceal their unease. Melissa's friends regarded her with obvious worry. In the middle of this uncomfortable situation, Stephen suddenly stood up. His face was set with resolve. "Mom, as a matter of fact, Melissa and I already have, as we have been tested," he announced. Stephen pulled his phone from his pocket, tapped at the screen, and presented it to Barbara. "Here are the results. The tests were overseen by a medical professional. They were part of our fertility treatments." A wave of murmuring spread throughout the gathering. Melissa gazed up at Stephen, happy that he was standing up for her. "We've been hoping to have a baby for quite some time," Melissa said softly. This was information they hadn't shared with anyone. They had finally gotten pregnant with the help of medical intervention. Stephen glared at Barbara and with biting sarcasm said, "Mom, it's questionable if you're actually Dad's daughter, you know." What do you imagine Dad would think about your conduct today if he were still living? Barbara's smile vanished. Her face lost all color, and she started to open and close her mouth as though she couldn't find the words. Okay, I was about to say something to Stephen, but he interrupted me. That's enough, Mom, he said, shutting down his mother's words. I'm not going to let you upset Melissa any more today. The room became incredibly quiet after that. Alexander Ross murmured something to his wife, and they both looked really uneasy. They gave Melissa and Stephen a quick nod before heading out of the room. Melissa, are you all right? Jennifer hurried over to her sister. You could see both anger and worry in her eyes. Yes, why? Melissa replied, her voice barely a whisper and her complexion was very light. Stephen put his arm around his wife and held her close. Everyone, Stephen announced, let's call it a day given how Melissa is feeling. The other guests, though they looked a bit puzzled, seemed to understand and started to depart. Barbara just stood there, frozen, and no one said a word to her. Room which was slowly becoming empty, Melissa remained seated, still holding onto the box containing the DNA test. Tears started to well up in her eyes, but they were tears of fury, not sadness. I never anticipated the day would go this way, Melissa murmured, and Stephen took her hand in his. Melissa, you've done absolutely nothing wrong. My mother's actions are inexcusable. I'll make her pay for this, he said. There was a coldness and a resolve in his voice that I'd never heard before. Stephen, Melissa, and Barbara were the last ones to leave the baby shower. As they walked down to the hotel lobby, there was a heavy feeling in the air between them. Melissa's parents and Jennifer watched from a little way off. Mom, we need to have a conversation, Stephen said. His tone was quiet, but I could see the rage flickering in his gaze. He brought Barbic to a secluded part of the lobby out of earshot. Melissa trailed behind us without a word. Stephen, you've completely lost your sense of fun. I was simply, a joke. Stephen's voice rose a bit. Do you actually consider that a joke? You attacked Melissa's character in front of everyone. Barbara appeared a little rattled by her son's intensity, but she quickly collected herself. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. I was simply offering a method to prove family connections. If you're so sure of yourselves, why get so worked up? That's not the point, Stephen stated through clenched teeth. Do you even understand how much Melissa and I went through to conceive this child? Barbara looked over at Melissa discreetly. That's precisely what I said. If you can't conceive naturally, something has to be amiss. Tears filled Melissa's eyes, though she struggled to keep them from falling. Stephen firmly took hold of his mother's shoulder. This is your last chance. If you don't apologize to Melissa, I'm going to rethink how we relate. I won't let you wound my wife, even if you're my own mom. Barbara gently pulled away from him, smoothing out her jacket. You've always been a bit theatrical. You'll chill out by tomorrow. I'll reach out to you this weekend. Are you even listening? Stephen's voice became more firm. No communication until you apologize. Barbara looked at her son with open disbelief, and then mumbled fine, and walked towards the exit to call a taxi. Stephen went back to Melissa and tenderly put his arms around her. Are you all right? I pressed my face into my husband's shirt, and at last the tears started coming. Why does she despise me so intensely? Jennifer came closer and patted my back. Let's head back. You can relax at my apartment. The following morning, I sat in Jennifer's Upper East Side living room, drinking tea and calmly processing everything that happened the day before. Stephen had already gone to the office for an unexpected meeting. I've never felt so embarrassed in my entire life, I whispered softly. I can't ever forgive that woman, Jennifer stated as she opened her laptop. From a legal viewpoint, this is clearly harassment. It might even be defamation because it was said in public. We should take legal action. I looked at Jennifer with disbelief. Certainly, Jennifer continued, wearing a stern expression. She made comments that greatly harmed your good name in front of several people, especially in front of Stephen's client. I thought about this for a moment. But going to court about family issues, we could always use it as leverage, Jennifer commented, her voice sharp. We could demand a formal apology and a written promise to stop this behavior. If she doesn't do it, we could consider legal action. Jennifer took my hand in hers. Mel, you're always far too accommodating. Sometimes you need to defend yourself. But she's Stephen's mother. She'll be this baby's grandmother, I said, putting my hand on my stomach. That's absolutely right. And that's why having a good relationship is absolutely essential. We have to set clear boundaries before the baby arrives. At that moment, Stephen called. His voice was weary but also a bit tight. Melissa, are you all right? Yeah, I'm relaxing over at Jenny's, I asked. What about you? How'd the meeting go? Stephen paused briefly. I got a phone call from Alexander Ross. He's taken back the new office design job that was going to use my mom's interior design business. What? Melissa said, sounding shocked. Jennifer moved closer to listen. He said he can't do business with vendors who have troubled family lives. He's old-fashioned about family matters, and he was really put off by how my mom acted yesterday. Melissa inhaled sharply. Barbara's interior design shop was well regarded on Long Island, but she'd had a tough time getting contracts from major New York companies. Alexander Ross's job would have been a huge chance for her. "Does Barbara know yet?" I asked. "She called me earlier." She was crying and yelling, practically begging me to fix it somehow. "What did you say to her?" I responded with a cold tone. "I told her it's a result of her own behavior. Mr. Ross is above my boss. It's not something I can get involved with." A flicker of guilt went through me, mixed with a weird sense of freedom. It was like Barbara was finally dealing with the consequences of all the little ways she'd been mean to me over the years. "But will her business be okay?" I considered. "I don't think it will shut down, but it's going to hurt a lot." Apparently, she'd turned down other work because she was sure she would be working on this project. Once I got off the phone, I filled Jennifer in on what had happened. My sister paused to think, then said, "Karma. If she's finally getting that her behavior has consequences, then that's a positive development." Later that day, my cell phone rang and it was Barbara. After a brief pause, I picked it up. Barbara's voice sounded different. Her usual arrogance was gone and she was actually a little shaky. "Can we speak for a minute?" she asked. "Sure," I replied. "About yesterday," she began, carefully selecting her words, "I may have overstepped. But you understand, don't you?" she continued, "how a mother feels worried about her son." I took a long, slow breath. Was this supposed to be an apology? "Barbara, you attacked my integrity in front of everyone," I stated, "and on a day that was supposed to be happy for us." "I told you it was a joke," Barbara insisted. "Even jokes have boundaries," I replied, my voice getting firmer. "And if you're truly sorry, please stop making excuses." I heard Barbara gasp on the other end of the line. "Can I speak to Stephen?" she asked. "He's at work," I said, "and he said he won't take your calls." "What?" Barbara's voice grew louder. "I'm his mother, and I am his wife," I said quietly but firmly. "The wife who is carrying his child. If you genuinely want to fix things," I said, "please apologize sincerely and promise to change how you behave from now on. Until then, we'd rather you not contact us." "To be treated this way," Barbara's voice cracked with a mix of fury and disappointment. "I know this is what happens when you mess up, Barbara." Once I put the phone down, I hid my face with hands that were shaking. I still wasn't completely certain I'd handled things correctly. Still, I recalled the countless little jabs I'd had to deal with from Barbara through the years, so I realized I needed to be resolute this time. Later that night, when Stephen got home, I told him about the talk I'd had with Barbara. "Good job," Stephen said, giving me a hug. "Mom has never owned up to what she says and does. She ought to learn a valuable lesson this time around." But then he added, "She is, after all, your mother. She will be this baby's grandma." I agreed. "That's right, so ultimately we'll have to fix things." However, I said, first she must think about her behavior and offer a real apology. I nodded and spoke to the baby. "Sweetheart, we'll be fine. We are going to be a strong family." Deep down, however, I questioned whether things could ever really be right with Barbara. And I was anxious about whether the situation with Alexander Ross would also impact Stephen's job. It felt like many tough challenges were still ahead of us. A couple of weeks went by after the baby shower. Barbara kept calling both Stephen and me, but we didn't pick up the phone. She left messages, sent text messages, and even sent emails, all without a reply. The design shop where Barbara worked, Elegant Space, had suffered a huge setback since Alexander Ross's job had been pulled. There were just her and her assistant, Lynn, left in the store, and it didn't have any of the energy it once did. Lynn just gave me some papers, and I got the supplier's new price estimate. "It's 15% more than what we were paying previously." I sighed. Canceling the contract with Alexander Ross was starting to create problems with other partnerships. Word travels fast, and being seen as undependable would kill my business. "Thanks, Lynn," I said, my voice sounding weary. "You can head home for the day." After my assistant left, I slumped onto the expensive sofa in the store and covered my face with my hands. The business I'd worked so hard to create, and especially my relationship with my son, were falling apart because of a single decision. My phone buzzed. I briefly wished it was Stephen, but the screen showed a notification from the bank, a warning that my income had dropped by 30% compared to the month before. This shouldn't be happening, I whispered to myself. That DNA test kit was supposed to be nothing more than a silly prank. Well, that wasn't quite accurate. Secretly, I'd believed Melissa wasn't quite right for my son. Constantly concerned about Stephen's future, I'd kept testing Melissa, even occasionally causing her pain. The following day, I found myself shopping at a high-end supermarket on Long Island. Drained, I mindlessly grabbed some sugary snacks and put them in my cart, almost colliding with someone. "I'm sorry, My words stopped abruptly. Standing in front of me was Carol Green, Melissa's mother. "Carol," I exclaimed, surprised. My immediate impression was one of coldness emanating from Carol. Barbara, a strange quiet settled between us. Carol maneuvered her cart, preparing to depart. Barbara, without thinking, reached for her arm, pleading, "Please wait. Could you just hear me out for a quick second?" I told her quietly but decisively, "I'm not interested in talking to someone who caused my daughter pain." "I understand, I really get it." Barbara's eyes filled with tears. "I know what I did can't be excused. Please just tell me how to make amends." Carol's eyes were fixed on Barbara. Her normally impeccable hair was a mess today, and she looked exhausted with dark shadows beneath her eyes. Her makeup was subtle, and I didn't see any of her usual arrogance. "Are you truly sorry?" Carol asked carefully. "Yes." Barbara's voice was thick with emotion. "I'm on the verge of losing everything, my son, my company, and I might never get to know my grandchild." I let out a breath. "Let's go to the cafe." Inside the tiny cafe within the grocery store, the two women sat across from one another. Barbara, through her tears, detailed the negative impact of her actions. "I only wanted to shield Stephen," she said. "He means everything to me. After my husband died, he was all I had." I listened quietly, but my face softened. "But that's the core of your issue, Barbara," I finally said. "You've become too reliant on your son and put your own emotions above his well-being." "Melissa makes Stephen happy. That's all that matters to you." Barbara said nothing, just nodded her head. "If you genuinely desire to transform, your behavior is what truly matters," Carol went on to say. "Just saying you're sorry isn't sufficient. Melissa and Stephen need you to act in ways that restore their faith in you. I need you to tell me exactly what I should do," Barbara begged her sincerely. Carol paused, considering her response for a bit. "My initial piece of advice would be to get some professional assistance. Some of your habits require some work. You have to acknowledge this and actively work to change." Barbara really took this to heart. Later that day, she scheduled a consultation with a well-regarded therapist in the area. That first session was tough. Dr. Levin, who was an older woman, listened to Barbara's account and then evaluated how she acted. "Mrs. Johnson, you appear to be mistaking your love for your son with an unhealthy fixation," Dr. Levin stated gently. "It's normal to want what's best for your son, but in your situation, your reliance on him is excessive. This is jeopardizing his relationship." For the very first time, Barbara could see her own actions objectively. After her husband passed, she had put too many hopes and duties on Stephen. Secretly, she had been scared that he'd become independent and have his own household. After about 3 therapy appointments, Barbara received a message from Jennifer Carter via email. The subject line explained the possibility of legal steps. With shaky hands, she opened the email, and the content inside was written using formal legal language. As Melissa's spokesperson, Jennifer explained that Barbara's actions might be considered harassment and damaging to Melissa's reputation, and that legal options were being considered. But the closing of the email also suggested they were open to a resolution. Barbara promptly responded to Jennifer, saying she would agree to all the terms, and she started working on a letter of apology, plus a plan for how to improve. Barbara, with the counselor's assistance, honestly admitted to the issues with her conduct and spelled out steps for positive changes in her plan. "Considering my son's right to make his own decisions, and his joy, and also accepting Melissa as part of our family, while planning to create a good relationship with my grandchild," she meticulously laid out each element. She admitted the emotional damage and the hurt her conduct created, and she also sincerely said she was sorry in her letter. "You were injured by my behavior, and your integrity was attacked. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to regain your trust," she wrote from the heart. Additionally, Barbara offered to voluntarily attend family therapy. She knew the entire family needed professional support to create strong, positive connections. Jennifer got the apology letter and improvement plan approximately 4 weeks after the baby shower. She looked them over with Carol and decided to show them to Melissa. Handing Melissa the documents in her apartment living room, Jennifer presented Barbara's letter of apology and the improvement plan. As I reviewed the papers, they sounded authentic to me. Melissa was quietly going over the papers, and her face showed many feelings. Stephen remained silent as he sat next to his wife with his hand on her. "So what do you make of it?" Stephen asked Melissa when she'd finished reading. "She sounds truly sorry," Melissa replied softly, "but it's hard to rebuild trust after it's been shattered." "Mel, we'll back whatever you decide," Carol said kindly to her daughter. "Nobody can force you into doing something you don't want to do." I reread the apology letter. It expressed Barbara's deep sorrow and a sincere wish to improve. "I feel like we should give her one more shot," Stephen stated in a low voice. "Mother made a mistake, a really big one. Nevertheless, she is trying to make changes. As a family, perhaps we should be open to giving her one final chance." A long silence followed. I felt a mix of feelings, including rage, pain, fear, and just a little bit of hope. I put my hand on my stomach and pondered over what would be best for this new life. "All right, I made my mind up," Melissa finally said. "We should give Barbara one final chance. I'm willing to go to family therapy, but it has to be clear that this is the last chance." Jennifer agreed and pledged to reach out to Barbara. I looked out the window, realizing that the coming journey would not be simple. However, for my family, and for the baby coming, I found the strength to move toward healing. A healthy baby's cry was heard from the delivery room of a fancy hospital in Manhattan. I just brought a gorgeous baby girl into the world after a long delivery. The spring sunshine streaming through the window seemed like it was celebrating the new life. She's perfect, Stephen said, his eyes welling up as he cradled the small baby in his arms. His face was filled with a joy and feeling that words couldn't describe. She really is beautiful, I said, feeling worn out but content, and then I smiled. I've picked out a name for her. I'm going to name her Elizabeth after my grandmother. Elizabeth Johnson, Stephen repeated softly. That's a lovely name. My parents and Jennifer had already hurried to the hospital. Carol was practically in tears as she held her granddaughter, and Robert was happily snapping pictures of our new family. Did you let Barbara know? Carol asked Stephen in a low voice. He paused, then nodded. I sent her a text. I haven't asked her to come to the hospital yet, though. The relationship with Barbara was getting better slowly. We'd been going to family therapy for the past 3 months, and she was starting to understand why she acted the way she did, and she was still trying to change things. With the assistance of Dr. Martin, a family therapy expert, Barbara, Stephen, and I were slowly learning how to talk to each other. 2 weeks after Elizabeth was born, we had a family meeting. Barbara wants to meet her granddaughter, Dr. Martin said gently. How do you two feel about it? Stephen and I looked at each other. With some stipulations, I said quietly. I'd like to start with short visits at our house. I remember when Elizabeth was just a month old, I went to Melissa and Stephen's place for the first time to see my granddaughter. I felt a little nervous, and I brought a little present with me. My mother gave it to me a long time ago. The present I had was a silver baby bracelet. My family had been giving it to newborns for generations, and I told them, it's for Elizabeth if you want it. Melissa accepted the gift, but she just gave a small smile. Even though we weren't fully trusting each other again, this felt like a fresh start. I heard Melissa say, "Thank you, Barbara." When I held Elizabeth, tears started to well up. I remember thinking, she's such a gorgeous baby. I whispered to Stephen, she looks just like you know. At the same time, my business was still having a really tough time. Word had spread about the project that went south with Alexander Ross, which meant it was harder for me to get new clients. I actually had to make the shop smaller and let some of my employees go. But when Elizabeth was 3 months old, I got a surprising phone call from Sandra, Alexander Ross's wife. Barbara, I've always respected your work, Sandra said on the phone. I know you've been dealing with some family problems. I believe that everyone deserves a second shot. I need someone to redesign my friend's apartment. Would you be interested? I was so touched I couldn't even talk. Even though it wasn't a huge project, it could become a big deal for my business. Thank you, Sandra, I responded, choking back tears. I really value this chance. The project actually went really well, and bit by bit, my business started getting back on its feet. Her genuine demeanor and attempts to transform little by little started to be acknowledged by the people in her orbit. After that, Elizabeth celebrated her first trip around the sun. Melissa arranged a small but loving birthday celebration right at the house. The space had decorations like balloons and streamers, and a tiny cage rested on the table. Barbara was also included in the invitation. She joined in the festivities in a low-key way, demonstrating her fondness for her granddaughter while still respecting Melissa's choices as a parent. You couldn't see any remnants of her old bossy ways. For Elizabeth, Barbara gave a small picture book. It used to be my most beloved book when I was a kid. I also read it to Stephen. I appreciate it. I'll read it to her, Melissa responded with a soft smile. While they sang the birthday song and watched Elizabeth happily reach for the cake, Melissa thought about everything very deeply. The event at the baby shower a year ago had been one of the worst embarrassments she had ever faced. But now she felt like that ordeal had helped everyone develop a little bit. Near the end of the gathering, Melissa and Barbara found themselves by themselves in the kitchen. Melissa, thank you for this past year, Barbara said in a quiet tone. If you hadn't given me another opportunity, I wouldn't be the person I am today. Melissa paused to consider before responding. Making errors can help people mature. Barbara, you've changed. I see that, I acknowledged. I understand it will require a lot more time for me to completely regain your faith, Barbara stated truthfully, but I think that time is worth investing. Melissa indicated her agreement with a nod. For Elizabeth's sake, too, we need to continue moving forward together as a family. Coming back into the family room, I saw Stephen twirling around with Elizabeth cradled in his grasp. My little girl was giggling with pure joy, held tight by her dad. Melissa's mom and dad, along with Jennifer, were smiling and observing the moment with affection. Looking at this new family dynamic, I realized we're not exactly the picture of perfection just yet. However, everyone is putting in effort, taking baby steps to relate to each other and connect. Maybe in the end, that's the essence of a real family. The light from the sunset filtered in through the window, softly lighting up the room, silently highlighting the optimism for what's to come.